Without further ado, Matt Paprocki.
My commute is not usual. I take this suit, I wrap it up, I stuff it inside of a backpack, I take my laptop and my shoes, I put it on my back, and I run 3.5 miles to downtown Chicago to my office at the Illinois Policy Institute, where I serve as president and CEO. So one morning about 1.5 years ago, I'm getting ready to go to work and I hear a noise. And it's my 6-year-old daughter, Fiona, and she heard me and she woke up and she's coming down the stairs and she's got her pink nightgown still on and she's got an American Girl doll under her arm and her hair is this crazy mess of blonde curly bedhead. And she looks at me and she says, "Daddy, why do you have to go to work?" And I went and grabbed her, and I grabbed her from the stairs and I put her on my lap and I smiled. Because I remember this moment when I was a kid. Do you remember the sounds and the smells of your parents getting ready to go to work? I can still hear my dad's electric razor, or I can still smell his aftershave as he came into my room and kissed me on the forehead when it was still dark. The noise of my mom putting away the dishes and the pots and the pans, and for some reason I couldn't explain it, filled me with pride. And so I grab my daughter and I say, "Fiona, well, Daddy has to work so I can provide and I can put a roof over our head and so that I can buy us food and so that we can buy the books and the toys we have." And I pick her up and I bring her back to her room and I tuck her in. I kiss her and I start my commute to work. So I'm running down the street and I'm about 3 blocks from my house. And I'm thinking about this moment and this profound question this 6-year-old girl asked me. Because her question was, why does work matter? And then I thought about my response and I thought, well, that was stupid, right? Like my daughter's asking me, like, why is work important? And I am talking about buying stuff. Like, certainly that matters, and providing is a significant value as being a parent. But that's like saying the reason we eat food is because it tastes good, right? That's insufficient to the question. And I keep thinking of all these things I wish I would have said, that I wish I would have told her. And there's this beautiful French term. It's l'esprit de l'escalier, which translates to the spirit of the stairs. It's this concept that inside of a moment, we can't think of the right thing to say. And then by the time we leave the room or go down the staircase, we think, I should have said that. And I keep thinking of this moment, I should have told her these things. And I'm running and I'm having this regret, and I see a man, and he's on the sidewalk, and he's got a floppy cowboy hat, and he's wearing these oversized cargo pants, and despite it being the middle of winter, he's not wearing a coat. And I know this person. I mean, I don't know him, but I know him because I run by him every single day. But for some reason today, I decided to stop, and I don't know if it was this conversation with my daughter or the Holy Spirit, or both. And so I stopped my run, and I went to this man, and I reached out my hand, and I said, "I'm Matt." And he said, "My name is Stephen Blake." Stephen told me his story that he served our country in the military. When he came back home to Chicago, he couldn't find work, made some bad decisions, and became homeless. But Stephen told me about his dreams. He told me one day he wanted to be an entrepreneur. What he wanted to do most of all is to sell healthy breakfast to commuters on their way to work. He wanted to open a simple stand there on the street to sell apples and bananas and fresh fruit that for the people who were running late could still have a healthy breakfast. And I'm excited at this point. Stephen, we should do that. And Stephen says, "Matt, I want to." He said, "There's just one problem. It's illegal for me to sell food in the city of Chicago." I can't tell you how frustrated this made me. And it wasn't just Stephen, that it is actually illegal for anybody to push a food cart, for anybody to sell fresh food inside of the city of Chicago. Right? And here's a man who's standing here raising his hand and saying, "I want help." Probably even more than that, he's saying, "Actually, I don't need your help. Just get out of my way and let me work." And this is true for millions of Americans. We have thousands of laws in every single one of our states that prevent the poor, the disadvantaged from getting work in the first place. And maybe even worse, we have this incentive structure which gives people handouts and tells them, don't bother working, right? They come in with their hand raised and they walk into a welfare office and we give them a plastic card with a little bit of money on it in the form of SNAP benefits, and we tell them to go away. Right? That's how we treat charity in this company or in this country. And the problem is that we've whispered these lies year after year. Your work doesn't matter. The job is low pay. That means it's low dignity. This isn't a living wage. These are all lies, and they are not true. But the problem is this is all that poor people are hearing in America. It's gotten so bad, in fact, that for most of American existence, 95% of men worked. This in 1950s, 86% of men worked. Today, it's at its lowest level in American history. Only 68% of men are working. And I remember looking at Stephen that day and thinking, I'm not going to let this happen to you, right? And in this moment of frustration, an idea came out. And I said, what if we introduce laws? What if we introduce bills? And we worked with direct service agencies and we passed them into law. And in this moment, we created the Center for Poverty Solutions. The goal starts in the city of Chicago. Our goal in the next 5 years is to reduce poverty by 5% by creating work and opportunities and removing barriers. And so there, I got together with Stephen Blake. We drafted legislation. We introduced it inside of City Hall. We held a press conference. And it passed into law. Right now, Stephen Blake is currently in downtown Chicago. He is legally selling fresh fruit to commuters on their way to work. That's right. That's not even the best part. That's not even the best part. Stephen is no longer homeless. Stephen, that's right. Stephen has a family. Stephen has realized that through work he could find dignity and he could find opportunity. And it changed his life. And what Stephen realized, well, actually, Stephen told me last week, he said, Matt, I'm looking to hire 2 new employees. I want to hire 2 people, and they're going to be homeless. And he says, but I want to tell you something, they won't be homeless for long. Because what Stephen realized is something that millions of Americans who have escaped poverty have realized, that there's one single factor that can reduce poverty by 87%. It's work. Specifically, it's the dignity of work. For those people in America who have a full-time job, that are not working, 40% of them are in poverty if you are not working. If you have a job, only 2% of that population is in poverty. If you include wealth transfers like Section 8 housing, SNAP benefits, earned income tax credit, that number for full-time workers falls to 0%. That's how work can eradicate dignity. But the truth is that all of us know that work is about more than a job. It's about more than pay. That work create something else, right? We can realize our dignity, because the solution to poverty can't just be financial. That's insufficient. There's also a spiritual element to poverty. I know a lot about poverty because I've lived it. When I was 24 years old, I worked as a legislative analyst for the Illinois General Assembly. And one day I got a phone call, and it was from my mom. And her voice was trembling, and I could tell something was wrong. And she said, Matt, I've had this pain in my stomach, and I just went to the hospital, and I've been diagnosed with stomach cancer. I felt the life go out of my body. I sat on my chair, and I cried. The truth is, this isn't the first time I've gotten a phone call like this. My father died 6 years earlier from cancer. And so with tears in my eyes, I walked to my boss's office and I said, I can't work here anymore. I need to take care of my mother full time. And for the next 8 months, I had the most dignifying work of my life. I had the honor to take care of my mother, the woman who raised me. But we all know the pains of cancer are dreadful. And every day it got worse and worse, and eventually the pain of cancer was so bad she couldn't sleep. And so I started a tradition. I would get down on my knees at night, and I'd rub her feet. And it would give her this temporary and momentary relief. And the reason that I did it was I was hopeful, and I prayed that she would fall asleep. But every night that I did this, I would look up, and she'd be staring at me, wide-eyed, smiling. This, to this day, is my vision on God. It's a parent who loves his children so much that despite all the pain and the suffering of this world, he can't keep his eyes off his son, and he can't help but to smile. One cold December day, I got down on my knees. I rubbed her feet. Her eyes opened a glint. A small smile went across her face. She exhaled, and she died. I was 24 years old. I had no parents. I hadn't worked a job in 8 months. Nobody needed me. I went to my studio apartment in Chicago. I opened the door and I met with turning on the light switch, and nothing happened. And as I walked in, I was hit with this waft of smell. It was rotting food. My electricity had been cut off because I hadn't been working a job, and so all the food in my refrigerator had rotted and gone bad. I went back to a train station to go back to my mom's house, and I went to go in my wallet, and I didn't have $2 to my name. So I begged, and I begged, and I begged. And I felt this feeling that I've never felt before. It was hopelessness and worthlessness. And there's a word for it. It's called despair. And this is what begging does to human beings. It fills them with despair. But in the United States of America, we have a program that allows all people to beg, and we call it welfare. And I would have qualified for every welfare program there was. And I thank God I never took them. Because in America, welfare is not a safety net. It's a snare net. And the people who get caught in it never get out in their lifetime. In fact, Pew Research Study just did a look at this, and they said 70% of people who take $1 of welfare benefits will never get out in their entire lifetime. What changed my life? What helped me lift me up? It wasn't a handout. It wasn't somebody giving me money. It was work. I got a job. Somebody called me, and they said, Matt, I need you. And slowly, by surely, that despair went away. And we as Catholics, we understand why, right? We don't have to get too far into the Bible to understand what God's asking of us, right? The first 5 words of the Bible are, in the beginning, God created. In other words, God worked, right? He created us in His image, in His likeness, to work with Him, right? He put us in the Garden of Eden, a garden that He created. And He told us to cultivate, to build on His co-creation, on something that He started, and asked all of us to continue that process. Right? The Garden of Eden is not a land of leisure. It was a requirement to work. And we know this by going and reading the 10 Commandments. I'm going to take us back to Sunday school for a second. What's the third commandment? Remember and keep holy the Sabbath day. But what are the next words after that? Because the commandment doesn't end there. He says, for 6 days you shall work. Right? What God is not just saying is take off Sunday. What God is saying, work is a duty. It's a requirement that I'm giving to all of you. And the response of that is we can realize what God's dignity is. And I've seen this firsthand. This past December, I'm running to work. And I'm running and I see a man, and he's on the sidewalk. And he's got a floppy cowboy hat. And he's got oversized cargo pants. And despite it being the middle of winter, he's still not wearing a jacket. His name's Stephen Blake, and he's selling fruit to commuters. And I looked at him, and I'm freezing, right? It is cold outside. I said, Stephen, what are you doing out here? And Stephen says to me, he goes, Matt, do you see that man over there? I said, yeah. There's a man begging. He's got a cardboard sign that says, please help. He said, every day I used to do exactly that. I would stand here on the corner and I'd ask everybody, how can you help me? He said, through work, I do the opposite. Every person who comes by, I say, how can I help you? Right? That's dignity. That's a dignity that lifts people closer to the image and the likeness of God. That is a dignity that pulls people out of mental illness, out of despair, out of addiction. That is a dignity that's enshrined in our Constitution in the phrase, in the pursuit of happiness. This is a dignity that we here today have an opportunity to give to all people, to lift all people out of poverty. This is why we started the Center for Poverty Solutions. But it's more than that. It's also to lift up our souls. Right? Because this room here in Napa, it's fleeting. Right? Not only one day are we going to leave here very soon, but the truth is we're all going to die. And our eternity depends on a test that God will give us all, a test that we know the question to. Right? God will ask all of us, when I was hungry, did you feed me? When I was thirsty, did you give me something to drink? When I was naked, did you clothe me? Right? And what our Lord is asking isn't just to give people a handout and tell them to go away. He's not talking about just financial poverty. That's insufficient. He's talking about spiritual poverty. We can do this through work. The goal of the Center for Poverty Solutions is to lift all people up so they realize and understand the dignity of work, so that together when we stand in front of God and he said, what did you do to the least of my people? Did you feed them? Collectively, us all in this room can answer, amen, Lord. And I realized that day when I was running to work, I was filled with this regret, and I kept thinking, I wish I would have said this to my daughter. But instead, I've told her stories. I told her about Stephen. I told her about my journey. I told her about the thousands of other people that we have lifted out of poverty through the Center of Poverty Solutions. And before I came here, the day before I left, I asked my daughter, I said, Fiona, why does work matter? And actually, I'm going to let her answer that.
Fiona, why does work matter?
Work matters because it gives all people purpose. Work lifts us up to be co-creators with God. Work is a duty that allows all people to realize their dignity.
Now that's a better answer. Thank you.